The tall glass windows of the millionaire's mansion let in the soft golden light of evening. He sat alone at the dining table, a thick white envelope in his hand. The embossed lettering on the front read, Class of '95 Reunion, Invitation. He traced the letters slowly with his finger, a strange heaviness sitting in his chest. He leaned back, staring at the chandeliers above, memories of his school days flooding back. The teasing, the loneliness, how nobody ever asked him to sit at their lunch table. Now he was one of the richest men in the city, yet the thought of returning alone made him feel like that same boy again. Just then, the door creaked open. His assistant stepped inside carrying a tablet and a folder. "Sir, here are the schedules for tomorrow," she said softly, placing the folder on the table. He looked up at her, hesitation in his eyes. For a moment he stayed quiet, then he held up the invitation. "They've invited me to the reunion," he said. She smiled politely. "That's wonderful. Will you go?" His jaw tightened. "What's wonderful about walking into a room full of people who laughed at me 20 years ago? They'll laugh again, I know it." He sighed, then added quietly, "And I don't want to walk in alone." The assistant tilted her head, surprised by the vulnerability in his voice. "So, who will you take?" There was a long silence before he finally met her eyes. "You," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "Me, but, sir, I'm just." He cut her off gently. "You're not just anything. You've been the one person I trust. If I have to face them, I want you by my side." She hesitated, a faint blush creeping into her cheeks. Then she nodded slowly. "All right, if that's what you want." A flicker of relief crossed his face for the first time that evening. He carefully folded the invitation and set it aside, a new determination building in his chest. Glittered with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Former classmates clustered in groups, laughter and chatter bouncing off the walls. The millionaire stepped through the entrance in a tailored black suit, his assistant walking gracefully beside him in an elegant but modest dress. The moment they appeared, heads turned. Some eyes widened in surprise, others narrowed with judgment. Whispered voices traveled through the crowd. "Is that him? Finally showed up. Who's the woman? His secretary?" A laugh broke out nearby. "Imagine, a man like him bringing his assistant to a reunion." The millionaire heard every word. His jaw tightened, but he kept his posture tall, escorting her with quiet dignity. His assistant, sensing the shift in the room, leaned slightly closer and whispered, "Ignore them. They're just curious." He gave her a small, strained smile, but deep inside, the old wounds were reopening. The same mocking laughter, the same feeling of being on the outside. A former classmate in a flashy blue suit approached, grinning too wide. Well, look who finally decided to join us. And who do we have here?" "Your employee." The assistant extended her hand politely. "Nice to meet you. I'm his assistant." Her voice was calm, warm, and respectful. The man smirked and shook her hand, then glanced back at the crowd as if to signal another joke. Of course, always good to have someone carry your briefcase." His friends chuckled. The millionaire's chest burned with embarrassment, but before he could respond, his assistant squeezed his arm lightly. A subtle, reassuring gesture. She didn't flinch, didn't falter. Instead, she smiled and said, "Actually, I don't carry briefcases. I help him run companies." Her tone was so composed, so matter-of-fact, that the man's smirk faltered for a split second. The millionaire caught that hesitation, and for the first time since entering, he felt the faintest spark of pride. He looked at her, silently grateful. As the evening pressed forward, the evening moved into full swing. Waiters carried silver trays of wine and hors d'oeuvres through the ballroom, while a jazz band played softly in the corner. Clusters of old classmates were scattered across the room, some laughing too loudly, others caught up in old stories. The millionaire stood with his assistant near a tall round table, still aware of eyes on them. His former classmates drifted close, partly out of curiosity, partly to test him. A woman in a sparkling red dress stepped forward, her tone dripping with condescension. "So tell me," she said to the assistant, "what's it really like working for him? Long hours, endless errands, must be exhausting." The assistant didn't flinch. She sipped her water gracefully, then smiled. "It's challenging, yes, but it's also rewarding." I get to help make decisions that affect thousands of employees, manage international projects, and sometimes, like tonight, I get to see a man I respect walk back into a room that once underestimated him." Her words hung in the air. The group around them fell unusually quiet. The man in the flashy blue suit forced a laugh, trying to shake it off. "Sounds rehearsed," he muttered. But before he could continue, another classmate, a woman in glasses, leaned in. "Wait. You handle international projects?" she asked. "Which markets?" The assistant's eyes lit up. She spoke with confidence, outlining how they had recently expanded into Southeast Asia, describing cultural challenges, market growth, and how they tailored business strategies to local communities. Her explanations were clear, sharp, and captivating. Within minutes, the same people who had mocked her were now leaning closer, nodding, asking more questions. Even the jazz music in the background seemed to fade as her voice carried. The millionaire stood beside her, silently watching. His chest swelled, not just with pride, but with something deeper. For years, he had been defined by his wealth, his status, his success. Tonight, for the first time, it was her light shining, and he was glad to stand in its glow. By the time she finished, even the smirking blue suit man had gone silent, his earlier arrogance replaced with an awkward half-smile. The laughter had stopped. Respect had entered the room. The music softened as the evening reached its peak. Laughter and chatter buzzed throughout the ballroom, but the atmosphere had changed. No longer was the millionaire the subject of whispered mockery. Now, curious eyes followed him and his assistant with a quiet respect. At the center of the room, an old classmate clinked a glass to call for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "let's hear a few words from our very own success story, the man who's made millions since leaving these halls." Applause rippled through the room. The millionaire hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward. His assistant gave his arm a small, reassuring squeeze, and he walked to the front. He looked out at the faces, some friendly, some still skeptical, some unreadable. For a heartbeat, the same old insecurity threatened to rise. But then his eyes found his assistant standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, her steady gaze fixed on him. Strength flowed back into him. He cleared his throat. "When I received this invitation, I wasn't sure I would come," he began. "Back in school, I wasn't the boy anyone admired. I wasn't popular. I wasn't chosen. Truthfully, I was invisible. Tonight, walking into this room, I wondered if I'd feel that same loneliness again." A murmur stirred in the crowd. The millionaire let the silence settle before continuing. "But then I remembered something. Success isn't about how many people laugh with you at a party. It isn't about the titles or the numbers in a bank account. Success is about who stands by you when no one else does." He turned slightly, gesturing toward his assistant. "That's why I didn't come here alone. This woman, my assistant, has been more than an employee. She has been my advisor, my shield, my voice when I doubted myself. She has reminded me that respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And loyalty is priceless." The room fell completely silent. Some shifted uncomfortably, realizing their earlier mockery. Others lowered their eyes. He smiled faintly, his voice steady now. "So laugh if you must. But I'd rather stand here with one person who truly believes in me than with 100 who only pretend to." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, softly at first, applause began, genuine this time. It swelled, filling the ballroom, echoing under the chandeliers. The assistant's eyes glistened, but she kept her composure. As he stepped down, she whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "You weren't invisible tonight." And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel alone.